Breaking, Russia moves for a decisive breakthrough in Pokrovsk. We will talk about this with Yulian Robke, senior political editor at Bild. Yulian, glad to see you and thank you for joining us.
Hello, good to see you again.
Yulian, the city of Pokrovsk in the Donetsk region has been turned into a fortress, and Ukrainian defenders are doing everything possible to hold it. Meanwhile, Russia is massing forces in an attempt to make a decisive push to capture the city. How would you describe the current military significance of Pokrovsk for both Ukrainian and Russian forces?
Well, to be honest, I think it is of very different importance to both sides. For Ukraine, this is basically a symbolic defense now. It's the same as with Bakhmut. Unfortunately, all ways in and out of Pokrovsk have been cut, which means it is not a knot anymore for the trains. It's not a knot anymore for the highways. Everything is very much poisoned. The air is poisoned by Russian drones around. You were just showing the nets. We were trying to get in and out of the area, and it takes a lot of time. So for Ukraine, it is really difficult to defend Pokrovsk right now. As you know, there's only one single last road in and out, and it's really difficult. It's really something that is challenging for Ukraine just to get the arms and the soldiers and everything in and out of Pokrovsk. So this is really difficult for Ukraine, and the city as it is now, I would say semi-encircled, you could say, so from two sides at least. It is not of much military value, but of course it's of symbolic value, because if Russia gets this next big town, I think 65,000 people, and you may not forget Myrnograd is just nearby with formerly 41,000 people. So this means an agglomeration of 100,000 people. Of course, now 95% or 99% fled. This would be very bad for Ukraine. It would be another big sign, another signal of loss. For Russia, on the other side, it's totally different, because Russia needs Pokrovsk if it wants to have Kramatorsk and Slovyansk. So I think Russia, for more than a year now, is investing lots of forces there to get the city, to get the last big town before the long highway to Pavlograd in Dnipropetrovsk Oblast. And you saw this before, I think 2 months ago, when they tried to have this push to the north before capturing Pokrovsk. And this was the attempt to try to cut off the logistics for Kramatorsk and Slovyansk. And I think that's the main thing. If Russia really captures Pokrovsk, they don't need civilians, they don't need infrastructure, they don't need trains, they just need bunkers. They need places to hide their troops, to hide their weapons, to hide their tanks, and then to push forward both into the north to cut off, as I said, Slovyansk and Kramatorsk, and of course push to the west further, because there are still a number of little villages to then fulfill their gain to capture all of Donetsk Oblast. So this is a really big military importance for the Russians.
So in general, Yulian, could the fall of Pokrovsk significantly alter the operational balance in eastern Ukraine?
Well, as I said, if it really falls, and if Russia gets a foothold in the ruins of Pokrovsk, then it would be really dangerous, I think, because this would be another Western, for them, a very Western hub to put their troops in and to put their ammunition, their tanks, and then they could move into all directions, I think. Right now, tens of thousands of Russian troops are still caught in this battle, so it's important for them to stay there. It's a very long front line for them, all around the city, and Myrnograd nearby, I think it's more than 40 kilometers, which they have to man there. So this would also free a lot of forces, which then could go to other directions. But of course, I mean, it's another town, it's another big town in eastern Ukraine. I think capturing it would bring the Russians much closer to their aim to gain all of Donetsk Oblast. But beyond this, there's not, as I said, it's significant from a symbolic point. Yeah, you see this here. It's a very long front line around the town, which the Russians have to man. It's really long, and you see that Ukraine tries to keep the western entrance open. Again, I wouldn't say it's an absolute game changer. It would be another town. As I said before, the town is widely destroyed. It is not worth living anymore, unfortunately, for Ukrainian civilians. So it is being defended right now by the Ukrainian army to show that the Ukrainians are able to defend Pokrovsk and nearby Myrnograd. And I think this is the main aim right now. As we saw, unfortunately, the Russians are also advancing elsewhere, a little further south, where they entered Dnipropetrovsk Oblast and already captured 11 villages.
As we see on map, Russia hopes that taking Pokrovsk will provide an opportunity to seize the rest of the Donetsk region, as you said. And according to Ukrainian military officials, the Russians are now aiming for a decisive breakthrough in Pokrovsk, redeploying experienced marine units to the area. Besides Russian marine units, which other types of Russian forces are currently being redeployed to the Pokrovsk sector? Are there indications that Russian, maybe private military companies or irregular units are operating near Pokrovsk?
Yeah, as you were just saying, we had the regular Russian forces in the area for a long time, and now we had redeployments from south, I think from Kherson Oblast and Zaporizhzhia Oblast, forces going there. I think you said this, there are two other types of forces. One of them, and both are important for the Russians. The one is the so-called camels. So this is the so-called contract soldiers, which are just there on their motorbikes or just on foot or maybe on a quad, and they are just moving forward. This is the ones Russia is sacrificing, every day sacrificing, I would say 100 killed in the Pokrovsk area of them to just move forward. So this is their only aim. This is, well, I would say throw away soldiers from the Russians, which they just hired, got some money, you know, they got the bonus in the very beginning of their contract. So because no one thinks they will survive this, and then they push them forward and they have the tasks to go forward. And as you maybe know, I was just in the Pokrovsk area and I was with the drone defenders there from the Ukrainian side using FPV drones, and they said it's just unbelievable that the Russians are sending them again and again and again. And even if the Ukrainians kill and wound 20 of them, 2 hours later, there will be another 20 coming and they will just run forward, although most of them are getting killed. So this is the one thing. The other thing, which is also very important, is the absolute elite drone units from the Russian Federation. This is no throwaway soldiers. This is the absolutely elite, which is working for the army, which has a longer contract, which is probably was also in the army before now all these contracts were being signed. And these forces, especially Rubicon and Suda Plateau, they're absolutely dangerous. They're absolutely professional. And every Ukrainian soldier has lots of, you can say, respect from them. You can even say they're afraid of them, because this is the guys, if they are close by, this is deadly. What they are doing is blinding the Ukrainian forces by shooting down these ISR drones, so the reconnaissance drones. You can see just this morning that they downed at least 3 Vector from Germany and many Shark. We were with the Shark unit there and other Leleika and many others. So this is the one thing what they are doing. And the other thing is using these FPV kamikaze drones to attack Ukrainian soldiers. And they also use lots of Lancet and little Shaheds, but the little ones with cameras inside them. And this is absolutely devastating. We have seen so many hits there, military targets, civilian targets, everything like this. So you may never forget, if you see all these Russian, Ukrainians call them meat or camels, as I said, if you see them all dying at the same time, there are elite units there, which are very professional in paving the way, if you want so, for these ground troops and causing much damage to Ukrainian civilian and military infrastructure.
Mm-hmm. Ukrainian military officials and international experts alike describe the Rubicon Center as one of the most effective initiatives of the Russian Ministry of Defense,
yes,
in the field of combat drone operations. And in early September, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky revealed that Vladimir Putin had told Donald Trump he intended to seize the Donbas within 2 to 3 months, maximum 4. It is a lofty goal for the Russians, and since Ukrainians' counteroffensive stalled in November 2022, Russia has gained less than 1% of Ukrainian territory at the cost of hundreds of thousands of soldiers. Is Russia compensating for losses with the increased use of artillery, glide bombs, or other standoff weapons, FPV drones, as you said?
Yeah, first, I think it's wishful thinking of Mr. Putin to get Donbas in 2 to 3 months. I think that's impossible. Even from today on, I would say it's 2 to 3 years. This is what I would say. If it continues like it has been over the past, let's say, year, it's 2 to 3 years until maybe, if it continues, if nothing changes on the ground, until all of Donbas will be captured by the Russians. But the other stuff, it's just nonsense. I have been to Pokrovsk September 2024 to the city last time. And since then, in this area, the front moved maybe, 5 kilometers to the north, a little to the west, but not on the city outskirts, almost not. So that's the first thing. The second thing is, yes, it is an unbelievable amount of firepower Russia is using there. I have been just 4 days ago, that was my last day in Ukraine. I have been close to the front lines for the whole day with one of the units of a Ukrainian battalion. And yesterday I published a little video there, and you could see that in 2 minutes it was 37 explosions only in this part of the front. I cannot say exactly where it was, but I can tell you I could hear them all. You can hear them all. And so this means it's 26,000 impacts from the Russian side on one day in this area of the front. It's unbelievable what they are losing. It was Donetsk Oblast. This is what I can say. So it's an amazing amount of firepower they're having there. Despite all the Ukrainian attempts to seize this, to calm this down. But we were with the soldiers of this Shark unit, and we could see that every day they're hitting new Russian artillery pieces. So every day, although there are so many Ukrainian units, the Russians are moving forward with new artillery pieces, towed artillery, mobile, so self-propelled artillery, and many other pieces. And this is all being put to this Donetsk front line to then make the final push. In addition, you rightfully said that I think it's official numbers just from the Russian general staff that they are successfully sending 35,000 volunteers, so Russian citizens, which like to kill for money, to the front line every month, which is a lot, which is really a giant amount. So you can see Russia is really spending a lot of money, a lot of people, a lot of resources and of time. As I said, it's more than 1 year, this battle there now, to capture Pokrovsk and capture the remaining towns and villages of Donetsk Oblast.
Ilan, are Russian forces using maybe new or adapted tactics since previous assaults in the region? And how does the battle for Pokrovsk compare to previous sieges such as Bakhmut or Avdiivka? And are there signs of Russian logistical vulnerabilities that Ukraine could exploit around Pokrovsk?
Well, I think it's not much different than the other battles. I think there are more drones now. That's a big difference. There are more optical drones, which haven't been there. But the main thing for the Russians is still their fire superiority on the one side. And we didn't talk about this yet, but there are glide bombs. Every minute, there are glide bombs hitting this area. Not every minute, but let's say every 5 minutes. So just the Pokrovsk area is hit by around 50 to sometimes 100 glide bombs a day from the Russian side. And unfortunately, Ukraine has nothing to do against this. So if you're talking of a vulnerability, yes, there are airplanes in the air. If you shoot them down, you don't need to shoot down all of them, but if you shoot down one per week or something like this, this will dramatically decrease. I'm quite sure that the Russians will not dare to go there if they know this airspace is contested. But so far, it's not contested. The Russians can do whatever they want. They're flying in 8 to 12 kilometer altitude until, let's say, 10, 15 kilometer before the front line. Then they're dropping their glide bombs, which have a range of 50 to 70 kilometers. So this is absolutely devastating for the Ukrainians. As you probably know, most Russian soldiers are getting killed by Ukrainian drones, but most Ukrainian soldiers are getting killed by Russian glide bombs. So this would be a game changer. This is a vulnerability. If there would be any country willing to supply mobile air defense, which is able to shoot down Russian planes, that would be a game changer in this area. Then this offensive would dramatically slow down from the Russian side. And I don't see them advancing without their air superiority. So this is one thing I would say. The other things we already touched upon. I think Rubicon is getting better and better in this area. And the only thing, unfortunately, to stop Rubicon is to kill the drone teams. You cannot, they have thousands and thousands of drones. They're coming every day. It's almost impossible to defend against optical drones because they have these little wires, 20 kilometer, 25 kilometer wires behind them. The Russians are also operating with repeater drones in the air, which are flying and then having this little, it's called Matka, I think, motherships. And they have these little drones. So all of this is so much technology they're using there that the only thing you can do, and this is what Ukraine is aiming for, is killing the drone teams on the ground. Unfortunately, Rubicon is not 50, but I think it's several thousand soldiers right now. which are deployed to this area, and they are in hundreds of houses trying to do what they do. And yes, Ukraine trying to defend, and unfortunately, and this is really new, I saw this, and maybe you also saw this in videos, we accompanied Ukrainian soldiers. There are two things you can do against fire-by-wire drones. The one is shotgun, shooting them down when they are just above you with a hunting rifle, so a 200-year-old method. And the other one is nets over the streets, which is an even older method. It's fisher nets, so fishing nets. So the only thing against this very modern Russian warfare is 200 to 300-year-old technology Ukraine is using. And this is something really absurd happening there.
The audience, what do you think about fishing nets? You can write in comments. And are Russian forces deploying tanks and other armored vehicles in their attacks?
Yeah, I was just touching upon the fisher nets. They are deployed and they are constructed on hundreds of kilometers. I've seen them in the Kramatorsk area, in the Drushkivka area, in the Pavlograd area even. They start this in the Meshova area, in the Dobrepilya area. Everything is netted there. And I was driving the streets, and I can tell you it gives you a better feeling, I would say. The feeling is a little better because you think, okay, if there's a little drone coming down, it will probably be stopped by the net. Unfortunately, as I said before, we saw many bigger drones hitting these streets at the same time, like Lancet, like Shahed, like Molnia, like many others, and they don't care so much about nets, unfortunately. So it gives you a better feeling, I would say, and it saves you from, as I said, optical drones, but it doesn't save you, and it doesn't also save the Ukrainian logistics from bigger drones, which just run through these nets and then hit the ground no matter what. And what was the other question?
And also about civilians, you mentioned civilians, and how is the civilian population impacting military operations in the area? What the situation?
Yes, the Russians do not distinguish between civilian targets and military targets. That's what I would say. If we are very honest, of course, we know that Ukrainian soldiers, they have to live somewhere. They're deployed there. If they live in barracks or tents, these barracks will be hit by the Russians as well. So it is for them, of course, I would say legal, and they know that they are paying rent to live in flats, live in apartments, live in houses. They are absolutely legally doing this within Ukraine. It's not like some illegal occupation. It's like really paying rent to the owners of these apartments. And I think the Russians know this. And as I said, the Russians, that's why they do not distinguish. They just target a town. If they think there's a Ukrainian soldier in this house, they do this. If they don't think this, but it really doesn't matter, because even if there is 1 or 2 Ukrainian soldiers living in a residential apartment and there are 20 or 30 civilians living in it, you see that 90% of the casualties will be civilians in these cases. And also, we have been in Bielorussk, which had 14,000 inhabitants just a year ago, and now it's down to 600. Why it's down to 600? Because the Russians were shelling everywhere. And even if they didn't hit every house, the glass was destroyed from every house. So the heating system is destroyed. It's just impossible to live there as a civilian. At least 95% of the population fled this area. And this is really frightening, because all these towns, also Dobrepilya, also Novodonetsk nearby, they are becoming ghost towns when they are still, I would say, 20 to 30 kilometers away from the front. You know what I mean? This is the Russians are using all they have, not according to military rules, not according to avoiding civilian casualties. It's just the range that decides. If something comes into Shahed range, the Shahed will fly on it. If something comes into Kap range, glide bombs, the Kap will fly on it. If something comes into Lancet range, into FPV range, into fiber wire range, they will just use it. They will use everything if it comes into range and if the Ukrainians cannot defend this area. And this makes it impossible for civilians to survive there, because the Russians, as I said, just bombed the whole towns. They know some Ukrainian soldiers are living there, and then they say, and they did the same in Syria, by the way, in 2015, 16, 17, their rationale is, if we make it impossible to live there for all the civilians, then we also make it impossible to live there for soldiers, and then we will capture this place at one day and so-called liberate it, of course, with any inhabitants and any Ukrainians remaining inside.
Yeah, and not only about Pokrovsk, Russian forces using clever tactics to seize Ukrainians' Kupyansk. The occupation of Kupyansk in the Kharkiv region is a strategic goal for Russian forces. In the area, they are partially succeeding in breaking through toward the town, said Alexei Bielsky, a spokesperson for the Dnipro Operational Strategic Grouping of Troops. The spokesperson also noted that the gas pipeline, as we see, which Russian forces used to enter Kupyansk, northern outskirts, is under Ukrainian fire control. Earlier, Russian troops had used underground pipelines to bypass Ukrainian defensive positions in Avdiivka, Donetsk region in January 2024, and in Sudzha, Kursk region in March 2025. What about the situation near Kupyansk, and how does the terrain and pipeline network influence the tactical choices of both Ukrainian and Russian forces?
Yeah. First, I wouldn't call it smart, to be honest. I wouldn't call it clever, because these are very old pipelines, decades old, and the Russians are doing something like what happens with the Trojan horse many years ago. So this is very old tactics. I think in Second World War also pipes were used under the towns and canal systems. What I think is a little frightening is that Ukrainians do not anticipate what's happening there. As you said, there were so many instances, including Avdiivka, including Kursk, also now in Kupyansk, where also in Chasiv Yar, by the way, where the Russians were using this tactic. So I don't understand why they first have to find another pipeline, get through this, get out on the other side before Ukrainian starts to realize, oh, there was a pipeline. So we have to hit the exit. I think Ukraine has to map all of them very well. Yes, they're under fire control, but again, under fire control doesn't mean you kill 100% of the Russians. It means maybe you kill 30%, 50%, maybe 70% of the Russians, which still means if it's a unit of 130 Russian soldiers will make it behind your front line. We have seen this in Avdiivka. It was terrible there. It was the end of the city. And they will attack you from behind. The same happened in Kursk, by the way, when they climbed, I think, 15 kilometers and exited north of Sudzha, and suddenly Ukrainian drone units had them all around them. So that was dangerous. I think it's not smart. It's just using very old infrastructure. I mean, climbing through a channel, climbing through a pipeline is nothing innovative. It's just using the infrastructure as it is. And I think Ukraine has to see this. So altogether, yes, unfortunately in Kupyansk, the Russians are also advancing. And there I think it's the lack of manpower from the Ukrainian side, which is most decisive, because the Russians on the western shore of the Oskil are advancing without tanks, as far as I know. Of course, they have air support, drone support, but still it's guys, it's Russian soldiers walking on the ground. So it's a very bad situation, and I think Kupyansk may not fall because, as you know, on the eastern side of the Oskil, there are still many square kilometers under Ukrainian control, and they can only be supplied through Kupyansk. So if Kupyansk falls, the entire part of the other side of the river will also collapse. In Dnipropetrovsk, you see the same problem. You were just mentioning this. The Russians are using extreme firepower there. You may not forget that it's this part of the front where the Russians can fire from the south, from Zaporizhzhia, as well as from the east, from Donetsk Oblast. And that makes it really easy for them to use many bombs, to use many flight corridors, to have the air superiority there. And if you look, I know it's Russian propaganda, but if you watch these videos there, you can always see that I think Beresova was one of the last villages which was captured. You can see that they're always using this extreme firepower. They're using dozens and dozens of Cubs. Then they're using MLRS, the Grad missiles and other missiles. Then come the drones. And finally, when everything is destroyed and when all the Ukrainian defense positions are destroyed, then you can see maybe, 5 to 10 to 20 soldiers moving in. Yes, maybe half of them are getting killed, but the other half is capturing the village and then keep moving within Dnipropetrovsk Oblast.
And what about Sumy region? Because President Volodymyr Zelensky has reported good results achieved by Ukrainian forces in the border area of Sumy region. How has the situation on the ground changed as a result of these successes?
But I don't know what you are seeing. I'm seeing that so far only 2 villages were liberated in Sumy. 2 villages and another 13 remain under Russian control. Yes, President Zelensky has said we are moving forward. We are regaining ground. I think it's happening between these villages, but I think still, from what the Russians once captured in Sumy, I think still 90% are under Russian control. Yes, the Russian offensive was stopped. That's a very good thing, I would say. Sumy is not in danger of being captured. But yeah, you are showing the map here. And I would say if you compare the red and the blue in this area, you see that 90% of the Russian captured territory is still under Russian control. You can see the same situation in Vovchansk area. You can see the same situation in Lipsy area, north of Kharkiv. I think the Russians are not unhappy with what's happening. Of course, they would like to have a successful offensive. They would like to capture a next town. But if it's not possible, I think it's, you see this there. They have these little pockets here and there and there. For them, it's okay because it binds hundreds, if not thousands of Ukrainian soldiers there, because everyone knows the Russians would like to advance. So if the Ukrainians are moving away, Russians will move forward. So it binds thousands of Ukrainian soldiers in these areas, which are also under attack, sometimes at least by the Russians. So yes, I mean, it's a very difficult situation. Yes, the Russian offensive was stopped. No, I don't see Sumy being liberated so far by the Ukrainian army.
Yulian, I would like to sincerely thank you for taking the time to speak with us and for sharing your expert analysis and insights. Your professional perspective is unavailable, and I greatly appreciate your continued support for Ukraine. I need to say that Yulian Robke, senior political editor at Bild, was with us today. Thank you for your time and see you.
Thank you. All the best.